Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to r/MaliciousCompliance, where you know the deal. People follow exact orders despite someone. And in today's episode, we've got bad bosses, nightmare customers, HOA Karens, all learning lessons they won't forget. Guys, the stories are so satisfying in this one, so grab a drink, relax, and try not to shake your heads too hard today. Let's dive in. So once upon a year, I used to work for a large hardware chain that had aprons that beautifully matched my pumpkin-esque figure. I worked in a busy flooring department, and I could share many stories, but the most delightful came from people overestimating the abilities of their vehicles. Now, the pros would always come in with appropriate vehicles and expectations, while the DIYers, well, they were something else. They would occasionally come in with a disdain for aproned associates. Our location had seen enough such DIYers come through that we had a cover your butt form that we developed. That said, one fine day, this one man comes in. He's in a rush, and he demanded the promptest of service. The guy was also annoyed at all project advice, and he took offense when we offered delivery service. He'd chosen a nice slate tile, and he wanted a pallet for his house. So we did up the sale, and we brought the pallet up to the drive-up area. The guy pulls up in his new Ford F-150. No reinforced trailer, just the truck. Now, that truck can carry roughly 2,000 pounds, give or take. The pallet was about 3,800 pounds. I told him that we would need to break open the pallet, and he could take half right away and the other half later. And hearing me offer that advice, the man went ballistic. They could hear him back in lighting, practically. After some back and forth, a few other managers came by and strongly advised him that his truck could not take the pallet. And by this point, the guy was screaming and foaming at the mouth. This is when I shrug. I grab the form and discuss the portion saying that he was ignoring our advice, and he absolves our company and its employee of any responsibility for the outcomes. The guy signs it, settles down, and our forklift starts to bring the pallet down on this poor truck. Once the shocks had bottomed out, I called for the forklift operator to stop. I showed the guy, and the operator confirmed that only half the load weight had been transferred, and we gave him a final chance to reconsider. No such luck. The guy then screams at us saying, "Just put the damn thing down so I can go home." So I indicated for the forklift driver to continue, and there was no immediate catastrophic failure. The customer now thinks we're all morons, and he lets us know it, while nearly everyone in the store, including many chuckling pro customers, are hanging out at the doors watching. The guy then gets into his truck, and he calls out a thanks to us effing dumbass morons. He then drives a whole 6 feet before, blam, the shocks blew and his rear axle bent in a bit. The guy came out screaming at us, calling us every name under the sun, saying how he was gonna sue us for breaking his truck, blah blah blah. Meanwhile, I just held the paper he signed, and I point up at the security cameras that looked over the area. The guy did cool down after 15 minutes of flipping out, and he declined my offer to call a tow truck. What a compliance that was, and guys, the fallout is so much sweeter knowing that it happened to a person who was such an a-hole towards the employees. Like, consider that the a-hole tax for you. So yeah, the moral of the story, maybe listen to the workers who might know a thing or two about loading heavy pallets onto vehicles, as that's their day-to-day job. And if you guys enjoyed that post about a screaming idiot learning a lesson, listen to this next post. So listening to your funny stories jogged my memory. This happened around the early 2000s when I was working for my uncle's fencing company. So this one customer, who we'll call Customer A for a-hole, purchased a newly constructed home. It was cookie cutter, everything builder grade. The land plots were divided by fluorescent orange marking spray paint, which is hardly official. My uncle submitted a bid per Customer A's request, and we got the project. We had the lowest bid, around $1,200 lower than the competition. The caveat is we collect full payment up front. It's not a deal breaker for customers as we accept credit card payments. This way, both parties are protected from fraud. During that time, my uncle had just left his previous job as a land surveyor, and his specialty was property line surveying. The estimated property line, marked by the above-mentioned orange spray paint, was nearly 2 feet off on one side of customer A's property. My uncle makes the necessary adjustments/markings, and we start digging the post holes. That's when customer A makes a surprise job site visit/inspection. The guy sees our post holes and he turns beet red. He rushes towards us and he starts dropping F-bombs left and right. He's screaming, saying, "What the F are you idiots doing? You're giving away part of my property to my effing neighbor. Can't you mother effers see the bright orange marking on the effing dirt? Now I want you idiots to fill up these holes ASAP and dig right where the orange lines are. I want my fence directly on top of the orange lines." I just about lost it, and I was about to get into customer A's face. That's when my uncle stops me and he tries to explain. He says the orange lines are off. Customer A says, "I'm the one paying here, not you, so you follow my effing directions, understood?" Of course, my uncle tries to protest and he says, "Please, let me explain." To which customer A says, "No, no, no. I've paid you in full. You're not paid to explain. You're paid to build my fence exactly the way I want it, where I want it. This effing conversation is over." Well, after he screams that, the guy drives off, and my uncle looks at me with a malicious smile and he says, "You heard him. Let's grab an early lunch and then we'll give him what he wants." Over lunch, he calls my aunt, his secretary, to have her draft up a new work order. In the new contract, it's explicitly and officially noted that the fence will be erected 22 inches east of the official property line, and that the customer will shoulder full responsibility and liability should a conflict arise with their future new neighbor, as the home next door was still unsold at that point, or any other party. My aunt emails the new contract to customer A. A bit later, Aunt calls and says customer A has signed and emailed the new contract back to her. And now that we have a paper trail, we go back to the site and continue working. That same afternoon, customer A pays us another visit. And he says, "I'm just checking to see if you guys decided to follow my instructions. You idiots didn't wait for me to sign the new contract before resuming work, did you?" I respond, "We sure did." As he turned around to leave, I can hear him mouthing something like "effing idiots." Upon completion 3 days later, he signs off that the work was satisfactory. The guy was still in a-hole mode, refusing to acknowledge either my uncle or I when we thanked him for his business. 4 months later, the guy contacts my uncle again, requesting for him to bid on a new project. And yep, you guessed it, it's to move the existing fence on top of the official property line. We gave him a stupidly high bid and we still secured the project. This time around, he was a teddy bear throughout the entire project. Once again, some people really need to listen when others talk instead of interrupting and running their mouth. And the fact that OP's uncle knew what he was doing, great malicious compliance. Like what's that saying? Never interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake. And in this case, an expensive mistake. Talk about easy money. And while we're on the topic of idiots screaming at people, these next two OPs teach their boss a good lesson. When I was younger, I got a job doing pavements and other stonework. I started with 3 new guys, and the first week was pure hell. The owner didn't teach us anything, and we had zero idea what we were doing. But the one thing the owner did do was yell at us like 90% of the time. The guy would tell you to do something that you haven't done ever, like driving a bobcat. And then he would yell at you for 5 minutes straight when you didn't know how to operate it. Or he would give you a concrete saw and then yell at you when you couldn't start it instantly. After 4 days of 12-hour days with no overtime paid, they changed our work site and we had to do some cobblestones for a big project. At this point, I was super exhausted. and all three of us were close to quitting because of all the yelling and zero instructions on anything. The boss man came to the new site and he showed us, just put the stones like this, hit them once so they're even in level and then move on. I tried it, but I learned quickly that my eyes can't handle the height difference, so I used the line to see where they should be. I hit 4 to 5 of them and then used the plank to see if they were on the same level, and then moved on. What I did looked nice, and using that plank took like 10 seconds of my time per 4 to 5 stones. But the boss noticed me doing this, and he yelled like crazy that there's no time to do it like how I'm doing it, and it'll take forever. The guy screams in my face saying, just hit it once and move on, it's effing that simple. And with that, he left, so that's what we did. For 12 hours, we did the fastest work ever. Every stone we got our hands on, we threw into the ground, hit it once, and then moved on. And let me tell you, everything looked like crap. It looked like a roller coaster. Some stones were 5 centimeters higher than others, and the lines were so crooked that you couldn't find a straight line even if you tried. Saturday came around, and the boss had went in to check on our work. He phoned me, and the guy yelled so much and so loud that I had to tone down the volume on my phone because I was worried about losing my hearing. The guy told me if I didn't come and fix that crap show that I've done that day, there would be zero work on Monday and that I'd be fired right now. I just told him, that's okay, good luck on finding some other guys to yell at. And just like that, I quit on the spot. The end result is all 3 of us quit that day, and the boss had to spend his whole Saturday fixing our mistakes. The best part is he also had to pay for us basically sabotaging his work site for 12 hours. I doubt he had fun looking for new workers after we left, as there was only him, his second in command, and his father who was trying to retire. After I left, I find out he had a super poor track record of keeping his employees for more than 1 season, as nobody would tolerate him longer than that. Well, I can't see why people wouldn't want to work with someone like that. Like getting screamed at all day while trying to make an honest living? Sign me up for that, right? But jokes aside, like I can't imagine this business standing the test of time, not with that guy in charge. Like this is another case of a guy who builds up a solid company that his useless son just happens to run into the ground after he takes over. Like I've read enough malicious compliance stories to know, guys. And this next OP has a similar nightmare boss story. Listen to this one. I need you to break down these giant concrete blocks in the blazing hot weather. Now that wasn't his exact words, but that was essentially my job description for a week while working on a construction site. There were these 2 gigantic concrete blocks that were poured to hold up the site's security cameras, and holy moly was that a bad idea. They could have put stakes in the ground, used sandbags, or just used a really wide frame. But no, giant concrete blocks was the plan. And now that the job was nearly done, and I was on the bottom of the pyramid at this job, I was the one who needed to destroy them. Now, I did everything I could to make this easier, like try to find an effective method, break off big pieces at a time, or try to talk my boss into using expanding grout. You know, the stuff that's meant for breaking concrete. But the guy was having none of it, and he told me to pull up my bootstraps and just do it. But here's the thing. There were 3 reasons in particular why I wanted to make it easier. Each alone was enough to justify a different method. Number 1, it was gonna be 30 plus degrees Celsius for the next week, which is 90 plus Fahrenheit. That might not sound bad, but this was like working in the desert. Number 2, the blocks were reinforced with microfibers. This means they don't fall apart in chunks. Cracks may form, but the fibers will hold it together, meaning that I'd need to chip it away little bits at a time, meaning more effort and more time. And lastly, the chipper I had was tiny. Like, this thing was meant for tiles or bricks, not giant blocks of concrete. This also meant it didn't have effective shock absorbers, so pretty much all the force would be going directly into my arms, and particularly my wrists. Also, I'm not a burly guy like a lot of other guys on site, so while this would be bad for any of the other guys, it was doubly so for a scrawny kid like me. Now, about my boss is I'm pretty fed up with him as it is, as he's aggressive, lazy, and he has no regard for my well-being. But unfortunately for him, neither did I. I also want to add that I'm better now, so don't worry. And this gave me the push to teach him a little lesson. All I did was simply do the job as he asked. I used the tiny, crappy chipper to break down those giant blocks in the blazing heat. And the thing is, I never actually finished. The first day, I got through about half the first block, and I came home with my hands and my wrists numb. The second day, I came in with my hands and wrists aching like crazy. I know how to survive, and I drank as much water as I could, but apparently it wasn't enough, because while I was working on the first block, I fainted. Luckily, somebody noticed and they called an ambulance. I was out for maybe 10 to 20 seconds, but when I got up, one of the trades workers was already on the phone with 911. When they got there, I was treated for severe dehydration and severe tendinitis, as I couldn't move my wrists without pain. I won't give the details of going to the HR, but there was another interesting detail. My boss wasn't on site that day, thinking that he didn't need to do anything that day, so he hung out at home. The thing is, though, because an ambulance was called, it was one of his primary duties to respond to it, but he wasn't there. This put him in some really hot water with his boss. I don't have all the details about what happened, but I was off the job site for 2 weeks while my wrist recovered. And when I returned, there was a new site manager who just wanted me to clean the site, not break the blocks, which were still there. I was told that old site manager was fired for giving me such stupid orders, but again, I don't know all the complete details since I finished working there 5 days later. So this story is about a power-hungry HOA president. We'll call her Helen, but just know that she's a Karen. So a little background about my neighborhood. It's basically a long street with a cul-de-sac at the end. Helen lives in one of the 4 houses that encircles the cul-de-sac. A few years ago, Helen proposed at our monthly HOA meeting that our street is too narrow for emergency vehicles like fire trucks or ambulances to fit through, and she's worried that they won't be able to reach the cul-de-sac houses in an emergency, which is BS. It's not a through road, so only residents of this small street ever need to use it. And sure, it can be a little tight at times, but 2-lane traffic moves comfortably. And again, rarely ever needs to because it's a quiet neighborhood street with not much traffic. The fire trucks can and have been accessing the cul-de-sac since the beginning of time. But Helen was on a power trip. She wanted to have one side of the street's curb painted yellow to restrict parking on the street. This move was heavily opposed because it would significantly limit street parking in our neighborhood. Plenty of people raised concerns that there wouldn't be enough parking, and this would affect the value of their homes. On top of that, since the street parking was first come, first serve, it would create undue competition between neighbors in securing a parking spot on our street. But Helen pushes back, saying that safety was way more important than being able to find a parking spot. She said there will always be plenty of room to park on the cul-de-sac if need be, that this shouldn't be an issue. After much deliberation, we put a vote in, and the motion did not pass. The highly unpopular curb painting would not be happening, or so we thought. Helen went to the fire department a few days later, and she voiced her concerns. She told them that the neighborhood residents had her support in painting the curb. And on a Monday afternoon, while everyone was at work, they painted the curb yellow. We all came back home that evening to find that our parking options had been cut in half and people were livid. Our neighbor in particular was having none of it. You see, the guy owned a small boat, which he typically kept parked on the street. But now that parking was significantly reduced, he decided that he would find a better place for his boat. He waited for Helen to leave for work the next day, and the guy parked it right in front of Helen's house on the cul-de-sac, per her suggestion. And let me tell you, the look on Helen's face when she came home to find her usual parking space had been taken over by a boat was worth the whole ordeal. And since he rarely ever took his boat out, it stays parked in front of her house pretty much all year round. At the next HOA election, she was voted out. The next president got the curb painted back to normal, but the boat guy still parks his boat in front of Helen's house. All is good in the world. Seriously guys, nothing puts a smile on my face faster than knowing that a smug HOA Karen lives with regretting what she said. And what a savage move by that one neighbor who, even though he can park his boat back in its original spot, continues to bless Karen with that wonderful view of his boat. Absolutely brilliant. So here's some backstory. I work at a corporate McDonald's in Michigan. I won't get into too much detail because it'll definitely give away where I live. The most important part of this backstory is that it's a corporate store, and it's harder to get rid of a problem manager because they have company protection. This means that issues keep getting brought up with no resolution, and we lose employees as a result. That said, our store fluctuates heavily between being overstaffed and being so understaffed that we can't function. Most of the reasons for quitting my store are the result of one manager. The manager in question, let's call her Jane, is the definition of a bad boss. She does things like not letting employees clock in if they had an altercation or annoyed her on her last shift. Jane's a department manager. She's in charge of the kitchen. Now, a fellow crew member who we'll call Terry had recently changed her schedule because of class, and she was mistakenly scheduled 4 shifts outside her new availability, which is no problem, right? Well, wrong. All 4 of these wrongly scheduled shifts were Jane's shifts. They had a 3-hour-long fight about it, and it's safe to say that these two hate each other very much. So with that said, here comes the malicious compliance. Something to understand about McDonald's is that most of the stores don't roll their own breakfast burritos. We're given the sausage, pepper, egg mix, tortillas, and cheese. We place the tortilla on a wrap, place 1 slice of the cheese torn in half on the tortilla, use a 3-ounce scoop to put the mix on the cheese, pile the mix in a line, and roll the burrito, and then roll the burrito into the wrap. Got the process? Good. This is something that afternoon shifts are supposed to be doing to fill about 7 large trays for the next morning, which is no big deal until they don't get it done. A few shifts after the clocking in debacle, Terry and I are working the grill together. We run out of breakfast burritos and find out when Terry goes to roll them that we're out of the mix. We just weren't told that because communication across even 2 shifts breaks down pretty fast. It's also no problem, right? Well, Jane thought that Terry was just being lazy and she didn't want to roll any burritos, and told her such. And she says to Terry, "Stop being so dang lazy and do what I tell you to do. Now go roll the burritos." So Terry did, without the mix. It took probably 40 only cheese burritos handed out to customers and 4 phone calls before Jane realizes she made a mistake. Terry, at this point, had made about 140 or so, 7 trays worth. And the thing is, Terry knew that what she was doing wasn't gonna end well, but she was told to roll the burritos, so she did. And if anyone's worked fast food, you'll know about something called food costs. It's how much wasted food is produced on one shift, and it has a significant impact on whether or not a manager is considered for promotions and raises, and it's a factor in overall effectiveness as a manager. Jane's responsible for not only all of the waste from this shift, but as a department manager for the kitchen, she's also responsible for the overall store waste. 140 tortillas is a lot of waste for one shift to produce, as is 3/4 of a block of cheese. What we didn't know at the time is that it was the last day of accounting for food costs to receive a bonus check. That little spike of extra food waste lost Jane her bonus check. Amazingly, Terry didn't get sent home, and we all got to watch the fallout. Jane's currently on probation because of this mistake, and if something else major happens, she could lose her job. She's also not allowed to run any shifts on her own during probation because another manager has to be there if something else happens. I've since left for college, but I'm sure that Jane isn't going to be there when I get back. It's hard to change 8 years of anger in one day. And to think this all happened all because she didn't believe Terry that they didn't have the burrito mix. Like, you'd think a manager with those distrust issues would think to check the inventory herself. And I'm sure we can agree that Karen needs to get fired. Like, you can't be lazy and try to torture your underlings. This is what you get. Way back in 1989, I worked for the planogram team for my local Target. We set up and took apart store displays and fixtures, which included product label updates and building out new display models. In February, we were assigned 6 weeks of overnight shifts to completely gut and then replace 4 whole departments: the home goods and furniture, hardware and automotive, and toy departments. Management promised us extra help and plenty of time to take down the huge furniture flats and rebuilds in the home goods, which had heavy display models and they were elevated onto huge precast shelves. Anyone who's ever worked retail knows what I'm referring to. Well, management did nothing, and our new plans for the displays were to be given to us before we even started, and they were continually late. The toy department and hardware/automotive were fine. We finished those with no extra help within a day of when they were to be finished. The home goods and furniture plans were given to my boss at the start of our shift, along with the deadline of having everything finished in one night, which meant removing old display models, taking them in tubs to the trash compactor, removing the shelves along with the industrial carpet that was glued to the shelves, taking apart the furniture for the trash compactor, and building new furniture displays and putting them up on the new furniture flats. We were promised that we would have 4 to 6 employees help us that night, since a lot of the furniture was heavy bookshelves and desks, but we got F all. My supervisor Dolores was pissed, and rightly so. We were left with a note to get all of that work done within our shift, which was 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Conveniently, the general manager and the assistant managers were gone for the night, and nobody answered Dolores's calls. Now, about Dolores is, she was a big woman. She's a former army vet, 6 foot 2 inches tall, and she's built like a tank. I've never seen her so angry, or even angry until that night. There were only 5 of us to do the work of 12 people. I watched Dolores climb up on one of the furniture flats, wait a moment, and then, while looking straight into the camera, kicked a fake cherrywood end table off the flat, and then jumped down onto the flat. It splintered into several pieces. She then proceeded to stomp those pieces into many, many little pieces. She then said, "OP, what did it say to do with the old display models?" I checked the list, and I said, it says to disassemble them and then take the pieces to the compactor so they'll be easier to compact. Dolores then gestures to the flats, and she says, "Team, that's what we're going to do." So I climbed up and I knocked down a 3-shelf bookcase with a fake walnut finish. It fell flat. I then jumped on the back of the case and I broke through the particle board back. I then took out my hammer and I start smashing the sides of the bookcase. It came apart instantly. For the next 45 minutes, we took turns, climbing on each one of those furniture flats and knocking down the displays and destroying them all. We had so much fun. It was extremely therapeutic. We then swept up the remains and we put them into 2 tubs and left them by the compactor. We did manage to get the old displays down and put the new ones up. We were unable to remove the carpet from the old shelves as it was glued down and we didn't have any solvents to use. We also left the new displays in their boxes as there was no time to put them together. Dolores waited until the morning manager shows up and then she tore the guy a new one before leaving. When I came to work that night, the new furniture was already put together and up on the new displays. We were also given an apology by the regional manager, who Dolores called that day to let him know that we'd been screwed over. we were given a free pizza dinner for the trouble. I left Target 2 months later, and I moved out of state. Dolores retired 6 months later. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /malicious compliance. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/entitled people episode, your favorite, where psycho Karens think they rule the world, and it doesn't work out for them. Guys, go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.